Welcome to the Business Trendsetter podcast, where we talk about trends and lots of other amazing things on how to grow your business. My name is Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartone.
We have a lot of exciting things to talk about today. And Adam, I know you just got back from a whirlwind trip to the Midwest, correct?
Yeah, I did. I've been flying 4 of the last 5 weeks. So it's been definitely, people are acting like the pandemic is over and they're asking for workshops again, and they don't want to do them by Zoom right now. So there's old jokes about, atoms and bits, and I loved it when we had Zoom because I could just bit my way into people's lives. Now I want my atoms there again, and I'm finding out that it's still just as tiring or more so than ever.
Right. I remember when my first international flight was from Phoenix to Frankfurt. It was they don't have it anymore, but it was a single long 17.5-hour flight. And this kind of brings me to an idea. So if you leave if you leave LAX and you're flying to Rome, if you're 1 degree difference south from LA all the way to Rome, where do you think you're going to end up?
I would guess you're somewhere in Africa, but I don't know where.
Tunisia. Africa.
Tunisia, okay. North Africa, okay.
North Africa, but we're talking about,
all the way across the Mediterranean, basically.
All the way on the other side of the Mediterranean. This is actually a good backdrop. So lots of things happening with the Fed, lots of talk about recession, lots of talk about, course corrections and so forth. I'm interested, Adam. What do you have to say about what's happening with the Fed?
Yeah, I really appreciate how you introduced that one, Manny, because what we keep trying to tell people is that they need to be focused on the future. And we always tell them, you need to have your scenarios. You need to do your planning for the future, not planning from the past. And then the second piece of that is you have to keep these scenarios up to date. You can't just do your scenario planning and then say, now I want to go back and make some decisions. Let's go run the business and we'll look at this again in a few months, because the world's just changing so quickly, and that you have to keep these scenarios very, very much up to date. As you said, you could be pointed it towards Rome, but might, just slight variations in what happens. The wind could blow you off track 1 degree, and if the wind does that, as you said, you end up in a very different destination. And that's certainly something that's happening right now in terms of the U.S. and the global economy. I've been saying on these podcasts that I did not think we were going to go into a recession. And I said that because the employment rate is very, very high. We have very few people unemployed right now. We have employers struggling to fulfill their needs. And that's not just a U.S. problem. It's a global problem. We have this problem in Germany in spades, in China in spades. So there's a lot of places where this is a serious problem. And how could you have a recession when everybody's working so hard, right? And interest rates are like zero. So you have very low interest rates. You have everybody working. I didn't see where a recession would come from. But where I was misguided was I didn't anticipate the stupidity of the Federal Reserve and that they would come in with this massive interest rate increase. And I say that this is stupid because, as I said, the United States is not the only country with inflation. Canada has it about 1 point greater than we do. They're around 9% inflation. We'll not touch South America because it's famous for its inflation rates. But if you go to Europe, once again, the major countries of Europe and the EU currency group, they are all facing inflation rates that are north of 6%, 6 to 7%. U.S. monetary policy does not create inflation in Japan or China or France or Germany, right? The reason we're having inflation is because we just don't have the people working the way it used to work, right? We created this global supply chain, all these interlocking pieces, so that you would cut down a tree in South Carolina and send the tree someplace like Thailand, and then they would make it into a piece of furniture, and then they'd ship the furniture back, right? And so we really had that. Truly, that's how things were working until the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, materials got stuck on ships at sea for long periods of time. People quit working. The raw materials weren't being manufactured in a lot of cases. Yeah. Then, we get a vaccine. The vaccine comes out. People start working again. And like me, they start calling me up saying, Adam, could you help come in and run a workshop for us? But the reality is that we don't have that whole supply chain working right. And so when there's just no supply, but there's plenty of demand, prices are going to go up. If I'm standing at the corner and I've got five grapefruit that I can sell to people, and there's a line of cars 10 deep that have started to show up for my five grapefruit, I probably wouldn't sell them for 50 cents a piece. I'd probably start saying, who'll give me $5 for a grapefruit, and not get as much as I could for the thing. That's just smart business, right? To take advantage of that situation.
Yeah.
As long as you're not being, I wouldn't do it with drugs, I wouldn't do it with pharmaceuticals and some other products, which would not be the right way to go. But generally speaking, right, you're going to get higher prices. And so there's nothing that a Federal Reserve interest rate increase can do to stop inflation. It's not going to fix the supply chain. It's not going to put more ships through the port of Long Beach.
So why they do it? I mean, what's their mentality here? What's the possible ghost of a chance they would do this?
Well, again, it goes back to people looking in the rearview mirror and trying to plan for the forward from the past. I'm a bit older than you, and back in the 1970s, we had this runaway inflation. For a decade, we had interest rates that were 8% or greater every year, and so there was a lot of people that remember that. And in that era, what happened? It was before what we call the monetarists, or the University of Chicago, the Chicago School of Economics, Milton Friedman. That wasn't popular then. That came about around 1980. And so what you had a Federal Reserve that saw itself as managing interest rates. And it thought we need to keep interest rates, in this sort of 3, 4, 5% bracket. So that would be good for business. And by the way, in those days, you couldn't just go invest your money anywhere you wanted. If you had money and you wanted to save it, you couldn't go anywhere. You typically had to put it into what was called a savings and loan, or you put it into a credit union, or you put it into a bank. And once you put your money in a savings account, as they were called, you were guaranteed 5%. You couldn't make more and you couldn't make less. The federal government actually dictated the interest rate that you could get on your personal savings. So there's a lot more regulatory control. But in trying to control interest rates, what happened was they lost track of the money supply, and the money supply started to explode, and to try to keep interest rates down. The thought was, okay, price of oil jacked up. It went from 50 cents a barrel to $50 a barrel in a period of a couple of years. We started seeing that cost, that high energy cost, started to seep into everybody's life and made it more expensive to run equipment, to cut down trees, to get lumber, to build houses. So everything starts getting more expensive. And the Federal Reserve at that time, trying to keep interest rates down, flooded the market with money. And what they didn't know at the time, they didn't think through, was the fact that, by flooding it with money, we actually did the opposite of what we should have done. And there was this guy who came in named Paul Volcker, who was appointed by Jimmy Carter in his last year, and it went on to be head of the Federal Reserve under Ronald Reagan. Then he walked in, he was one of these monetarists, and he said, wait a minute, no, the thing to do is we're going to cut the money supply. And he did. And interest rates jumped to 20%. Nobody could afford to buy a house or anything, but it broke the back of inflation, and we've gone through, decades of very little to no inflation since then. So people got this idea that when you get inflation, what you have to do is cut the money supply dramatically, get rid, and in doing that, raise the interest rates, cut the money supply, and then you'll get rid of the inflation. But that was a different era. That we had what we called stagflation in those days. I mean, it was a stagnant economy. Unemployment rates were 7-8%. Yeah. People were hunting for jobs all the time. It wasn't a worker shortage. There was plenty of workers out there. The only people who were getting pay raises were ones that had what was called a cost of living adjustment, or a COLA, built into a union contract. Everybody else, they weren't getting raises, and they were watching inflation eat away at their base salary. So it was really stagnant economy. We couldn't get the demand. People, had money, but they, to the extent they were spending it, they couldn't get enough goods because the rates were so high. The inflation prices were going up so quickly. And if you're unfortunate enough to invest in the stock market, you were watching stocks plummet down because PE ratio shrunk because people said, I've got to get a much higher rate of return on my equity investment than 5 or 6%. I want to get 25 or 30% return on my investment in equity. So the value of equities plummeted, and Wall Street collapsed. And that was the problem then. Now what we see happening is Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, and even Janet Yellen, as head of the Secretary of Treasury, they're trying to apply the same medicine today that was applied in that era.
Right, in a much different economy, in a much different landscape.
Very different. I mean, today what we need is we need to get business working again. So I think, if Congress was able to do anything, which is just permanently deadlocked, and has been for too long. But the reality is now's when you need fiscal policy to step in. and try to, get these supply chains working again. Things like, okay, we don't have enough chips. Federal government gives you money for free to build a chip plant, that kind of a thing. Waive your property taxes for 30 years if you build a semiconductor plant. Those, undertake physical actions in order to try to get the supply chain reconnected and working, and take care of the, right now, China, the leader of China can decide, hey, we'll shut down a city the size of Shanghai and pay no attention to the global implications that has. So it's going to take a while for all that to shake out, but the raising interest rates is just going to make it worse. It's just going to it's going to cause businesses to slow down, but needlessly, in my opinion.
Yeah. So if we turn the mirror, if you will, back towards us, back towards small business, what are these business owners that listen to our podcast to do? I mean, I know people that are solopreneurs. I know people that are still have their day jobs, and I also know people that are CEOs of pretty good sized companies that listen to this podcast. What do they need to know in order to be prepared for what's happening or what will happen in the future?
Well, I started this research in the 1990s and, started the drafts of the book after the turn of the century, and it was published in 2007. Since then, we had the Great Recession of 2008, and we've been able to analyze what happened in a recession. And one of the things that I thought would occur did occur, and that is that in a recession, the struggling economies or the companies are the ones that die first. And the companies that are on the big trends make it through the recession the best. In other words, you have to grow your revenues, even during a recession. And it gets harder to grow your revenues because the competition is more intense. You're sitting in a situation where somebody's going to probably go out of business, so the competition's pretty intense. And what typical reaction as we went into the 2008 recession, and I was talking to small businesses at the time, was to keep your powder dry. As you're going into this recession, let's say you're a home builder or you're in construction and you get an opportunity to work on a project, and you do it and you look at the project and you say, oh, it looks like there's no profit left in this. So you know what? I'm not going to bid on it. I'm going to no bid this project. And they thought that's good business because we don't want to run out of cash. We've got to be careful with our money. This kind of logic was what's dominated. It turns out that was the wrong thing. That the people that said, you know what, I don't know if it looks like it could be unprofitable. I want to take that piece of business because I want to keep my company strong. I want to keep my people employed. And so I'm going to grab that piece of business and I'm going to use it to get me through the recession. Rather than trying to save my way to prosperity by cutting heads and reducing my business and being super careful and eliminating risk, what we found out was that was what got people into a lot of trouble. Right. And in fact, they would lose market share. They would lose the brand identity. There were a lot of losses that happened by trying to be careful and slow down as they went into a recession. Right. So now I'm saying, okay, you were needed to grow before, and I didn't anticipate a recession. Now I'm going to say we're going to probably have a recession, but it means it's more important that you get out there and compete very hard and win this business. We keep saying this over and over. It's revenues that matter, not earnings.
And there's a tremendous amount of data to support that. There's data to support the revenues, and the top line matters a lot. You talk to a lot of bean counters, and I guess I don't know if I want to say forgive me for saying this to the bean counters, but they're always looking at how do we slash costs, and how do we tuck our tail between our legs and ride this thing out, and like you just said. It's not the right strategy. You want to be reaching to get more business through the door, even if it may not be the most profitable, but it's going to keep you going. It's going to keep you employed. And then, of course, as your competition starts to die out, you're going to come out on the top when we get through this thing.
Right. I mean, one of the stories I like to tell is during the recession, the Reagan recession that we had in, I think it was 80, 82 timeline in there, shortly after he was made president. It was a really deep recession. Again, this was the Paul Volcker recession, who jacks interest rates up to 20%, tightens up the money supply, and it was bad. I mean, that was a really, really bad recession. And what happened was that a lot of people were saying at that time, you really have to keep your money. You really have to keep it tight and keep it close to you. But it turned out that was one of the best opportunities to invest ever. If you'd have gone into the stock market then, it turned out to be a fantastic play. If you had started to buy up plants that were shutting down, then it turned into a fantastic play. So the companies that focused on growth in that era came out really, really strong. And that's what we saw happen in the 2008 to 2010 Great Recession was the same pattern, right? And so now what I'm trying to get people to understand is, look, if you're managing cash flow, you're managing earnings, what you're doing is you're managing the results of the previous year, right? That's your old business, and those are the results, and that's what you got out of it. But as you go into a recession, it's the opportunity to really start thinking about how you could have your business be bigger and better and do more things, right? You can head out to it. So, for example, if you've been selling gasoline in a convenience store, now's the time to realize that, okay, gas consumption is going down, and we're probably going to have some problems, and prices will probably drop fairly soon in this recession. And maybe it's a good time to get into electric charging stations, right? Because you don't know anything about it. So it's a good time to really a good time to take a look at making that transition happen. And again, too few small businesses do this. Most of them see that as risky, and they're not sure they want to do it when times are good. But when times are good and their sales are going great and they're making money, then it's like, I'm too busy running the business as successful as it is to go do something new. Then here comes a recession. It's like, I got to count my pennies, and I got to be very careful, and I got to manage my cash flow so I don't go out and I do it. Well, then when is the time that you're supposed to develop new business, right? Yeah. You've got a reason always got a reason to never do it.
What's interesting is if you look at a lot of these recessions, and as they start to begin the process of cost cutting and tucking their tail between their legs, where do you think most of them start to cut first?
Oh, everybody, I think, looks at headcount. My reaction
within headcount. What particular group within headcount?
Well, don't most people start with the working employees, right? The people that are frontliners.
Sometimes, but my experience is it's salespeople.
I'm sorry, I didn't see where you were headed with that. Okay, yes, that's true.
Which is ridiculous, right? You're basically cutting off the mouth that feeds you, right? The hand that feeds you, and I just don't get it. I mean, I have lots of friends. I've been through it when I worked at a company based in New Mexico in 2008 timeframe, and everything was going well, and we had a lot where our forecast was strong, but the powers that be decided to shake things up because, quote unquote, we were going into a recession, and they ended up missing a huge opportunity because their competition did not cut headcount, and at the end of the day, they came out on top.
Yeah, I mean, it's really easy in your mind, you can say, I see a logical pattern. It's going to be a recession. People are going to buy less. Therefore, I need fewer salespeople. Right? But it's just the opposite, as you said. If you do that, you're trying to save your way to prosperity, and it never works, right? So you've now cut these salespeople, and nobody's digging and grunting around trying to find those pieces of work. Then you're not positioning yourself for success when things turn around in the economy. So you're absolutely right. Cutting salespeople would be the worst thing that you would want to do in this period. In fact, you want to get them out there and get them super aggressive. Now's the time to take the competition out. Now's the time to go after those projects. Now, one of the things we've learned from the data is that necessity becomes the mother of invention. If you go off and you say, hey, I want to take that piece of work, let's say it's $1 million piece of work, but you're afraid you might, if you run your numbers the classical way, you say, I'm going to lose $50,000 on this. Then you go to your people and you say that. You say, hey, I want to keep us ahead. I want to keep everybody employed. I want to beat out our competition. I want to be positioned for strong growth in the future. So I'm going to take this piece of work company, and it's $1 million. We got to figure out how to do things differently. Now's the time for us to face the future and say, what could we automate? What procedures could we use? How could we change the materials we use? Why do we change our process and how we get things done? Tell me, how can we do this so that we can, be innovative and make this into a profitable project? And of course, once you've done that, because your back's against the wall, it's a tough time. You get through that. Now you're way ahead of the competition because you not only got the customer and you got the revenue, maybe you even got some profits out of it, but you also got that innovation and you got that new process.
Yeah, and I think right now
you're really ahead.
I think right now is the time to really dig your heels in. And, one of the biggest things that we talk about at Spark Partners is really growth. It's all about growth. And how do you grow? By selling more, of what people want to buy, right? How do people know how do you know what to build or to what service you're providing in order to have your customers want to buy that? And of course, that has to do with trends. So right now
Yeah.
is a time to double down, to dig your heels in, and look at more creative, innovative ways to get the word out. If your salespeople are operating in one mode, think about what's the rest of the world doing. Where are things headed? I think I mentioned this whole chat bot to you regarding. I had an entire conversation with this chat bot, and it was like it was a real person, and it was setting up an appointment, a standard medical appointment, and it was just like it was crazy. So, do you have that in your company? Are you doing lots of video content? Are you reaching your customers in new and better ways? I don't know. Ask yourself those things.
So, like there was an innovation that I came across recently that really astounded me. I learned that people that are on Instagram and TikTok, they get these audiences, and to monetize it, they came up with some ideas. One of them was this a person, I think his name was Mr. Beast, and he came out with the Mr. Beast burger, and he said, "Eat this burger." Never opened a restaurant. What he did was instead his organization went out and tried to find restaurants, and they'd say, if you're in, let's say, Sacramento, California, you could be the Mr. Beast company. When people want to buy a Mr. Beast burger, they call the number or they go online or they go to Instagram and they say, I want to buy a Mr. Beast burger. And then you make it, put it in the box we give you, make it to our spec, put it in the box, and then DoorDash takes it to the customer, right? And I thought, how brilliant. Because what you're doing is you're taking advantage, that business model takes advantage of the new economy. It takes advantage of what we've learned in the pandemic about how people like the Instagram and the TikToks, people like the influencers that way. And it gives the influencer an opportunity to monetize themselves. Yep. And it gives a forward-thinking restaurant the opportunity to get incremental revenue because they're now making this product, even though it's not on their menu anywhere. They're making the product. And, it's a win for everybody, including the customer at the end of the day. And so I love that. That's an innovation that came out of a horrible thing, the pandemic, right? And that's what I keep trying to push people to think about is that you had the Great Recession. We had a pretty good economy. You have a pandemic. Now it looks like we're going to have a recession. Now's the time to really, really, really get innovative and start figuring out what could you do.
So
if I was in a restaurant, I'd be out there contacting people on the internet trying to find out how I could do it. And if I could find some influencer that doesn't yet have a food product, I try to reach out and say, hey, I'm a restaurant located in this place, and let's talk about, you putting a food product into your feed, and then let's figure out how we go do it. So don't rely on the influencer to do it. The restaurant can do it.
So, Mr. Beast, I am my kids, so I have a 16-year-old and a 14-year-old that I've been watching this guy for a few years now. And he routinely gives away cars, and so he's 24 years old. His net worth in 2022 was about $56 million.
Wow, that's good.
That's what it's projected to be. Last year was 45.
Wow, good for him.
Yeah, good for him.
Yeah. So again, I think we're starting out in this. What we started out here in our podcast today was you have to be looking forward. You have scenarios, but it's not a one-time event or it's not a quarterly event. You got to constantly look at your scenarios and see how are things in the world affecting that scenario. Is it going to play out the way you thought, or do you need to make adjustments? If the wind's blowing from the north and you're going to the east, you're going to the east and the wind's out of the north, it's going to want to blow you off. You have to adjust, right? You have to look at the things around you, and sometimes you have to make some serious changes in your scenario planning. In this case, I've gone from saying there won't be a recession to saying I really do think there will be a recession. And then you have to realize, okay, what that's going to do to interest rates, and we now know that what the Federal Reserve, how they're acting. So if you're in some places very interest rate sensitive, like home building, construction, windows and doors, things like that, you should anticipate that the demand is going to get hit. There's going to be a slowdown in demand, right? Yeah, so you got to be prepared for that.
And if you think about what's happening with with real estate, right? It's been a crazy real estate economy for the past year and a half, 2 years, and now with these interest rates going up, what do you think? Is it going to be the frost freeze that comes and slows everything down?
Well, it's going to slow down. Yeah, it's going to slow down pricing, real estate pricing, because most people buy a house with a mortgage, and if your mortgage rate's 2%, then I'm sorry, if your mortgage rate then was 2%, but now it's 5, then the amount of house you can buy is considerably less, right? Because your monthly payment is now based on that interest and how much interest you're paying on that loan. So consequently, it means that your ability to buy goes down. Instead of having, say, $1,000,000 to buy a house, you can only buy one worth $750,000, right? So that's going to definitely have an impact. But that's what I'm saying. Then, if your reaction to that is to say, "Oh, well, let's step back, let's be careful, let's save our pennies," I'm telling you that's the wrong thing to do, because if you're a home builder and it's going to be like this, then now's the time to really go after your competition. Now's the time to get creative and innovative and figure out how to make homes that fit the right price, maybe figure out how to do financing or help with financing. Just kind of, all the tools that are available to help you be creative. Because if you can drive one person out of your market, that's fantastic in home building. I mean, just losing one competitor improves your profitability dramatically in that industry. So everybody should be looking at it. And I think what we're trying to say here is scenario planning is pretty beneficial, pretty helpful. And if you're one of the first to take advantage of where this recession is going, you're likely going to position yourself very, very strongly.
Yeah, I think it comes down to that. We've talked about this in the past, Adam. It comes down to fear. And when you're fearful, you tend to hold back. I mean, I do a lot of breathing exercises. I'm trying to, meditation and so forth. And the only difference, physiologically speaking, between excitement and fear is breathing. Your body doesn't know the difference between excitement and fear except for breathing. When you're scared, you tend to breathe very shallowly. And when you're excited, you're wailing in and out. So it comes down to fear.
Well, and again, there's fear and there's risk, right? And people, when they're fearful, they'll say, well, I don't want to take a risk. And that's where I always like to tell them the story that Colonel Carl Bernard taught me, which was, he said in the Army, he was a Korean veteran, and he rose up to colonel in Vietnam. And he said in the Army, it's not hard to teach somebody when the bullets fly to dive into a foxhole. You want to get away from the bullets. And now you're in the foxhole and you're fearful for your life. What should you do? Well, you think you should sit in a foxhole, but actually that's the most dangerous thing, because the guys with the guns shooting the bullets at you, right behind them are the guys with the mortars and the artillery. And what are they trying to do? They're trying to lob a piece of ordnance right into your foxhole, and you're going to be annihilated if it hits. So once you realize, I'm afraid, and I'm in this foxhole, what you really have to do is face the fear and get out of the foxhole. You got to figure out a plan. And in fact, what they teach you in the Army is that that's one of the best times to charge. Because now, if you start to run back, the people in the infantry will be blasting away at you as you run away, right? But if you run forward towards the enemy, what happens is that eliminates their ability to fire these mortars, because now you're engaged and you're so close together they could kill their own people. So the thing that you want to do, which is sit in the foxhole and do nothing, is death. The second thing you want to do is get out of the foxhole and run backwards, get away from this. That's likely going to get you killed. The smartest thing to do is to come into the foxhole and go forward. And that's the most likely way that you'll survive. And they have to teach people this because, as you said, fear will cause you to think that that's risky behavior and I don't want to do it. When in fact, that's the best behavior you have, the greatest likelihood that you will survive. So that's what I think of this, recession is sort of being the enemy, and we got to take on the enemy, and we got to engage the enemy. That's an extreme point of view, and I hope I don't offend military people with that. But let's, I probably extended the analogy too far.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I think it's really, because I've been on both sides of that. I've been on the fearful side, and I've been on the let's charge side. Mm-hmm. And we work with lots of business owners who are about to stand up a business. Right now, they're thinking, well, maybe I should not stand up a business. Maybe I should not go forward. And what I gave a person advice this morning about the whole recession, and I mentioned to her, listen, right now, plan everything out and get ready to make your move very shortly, because there's going to be businesses closing down that are trying to recede, and they're not going to be ready for when things start to really pick up. People still have to buy things. People still want to go out to eat. People want to go to nightclubs. People want to live, and they're not just going to sit in some foxhole, if you will, and wait for the mortars to come.
I mean, right now, if I was running a dry cleaners, now is when I would either reduce pricing make special offers. It's summertime. I'd be making special offers to bring in your winter coat. Let us clean it up and get it stored. Get it so it can store for the winter. Be nice and clean, fresh, ready for you when the fall comes. I'd be coming up with routes that I drive and dropping handbills on those routes saying, we're going to start to do free pickup and delivery on your street. Let us know. Let us get you signed up so we can we can offer you service. Even a dry cleaner can take advantage of this kind of a situation to try to capture share, to get ahead of the competition. So then you get these customers lined up with you and they say, wow, during that, when times were tough, the recession was there, this guy in his dry cleaners, he went out of his way to get my business. I'm going to stick with this. I'll stay with her. She's a great business person. So it's a good time to get out there and do it. And it's a good time to innovate. And pushing people to innovate is the one really big thing you do. When times are good, people are so busy running the business, they don't think they need to innovate. Now is the time when you start to realize it's a great time to innovate, because if you can come up with these ideas, start making Mr. Beast burgers to fill in the gaps because people aren't going out to eat as much. That might be the one thing that helps you come out the other end of this recession much stronger than anybody else.
Absolutely.
And I just want to end it off with one thing, which is that I think next time we get together, we should talk a little bit about financial instruments, like what's happening in the stock market, what's happening with growth companies, what's happening with financing, and what's happening with Bitcoin. And so I hope people will tune in for that next time. And in the meantime, I think people should understand that if they're struggling with this idea of growing your way into and through a recession, they should give us a call. Because if it feels uncomfortable and you don't want to do it, then talk to us.
Yeah.
We can help you see your way through that for us.
What's crazy is that in life, if you're trying to get bigger biceps, you're trying to get cut, you're trying to get in shape, you go out and you hire a trainer. You go out and you go to the gym and you put in that extra work. If you're trying to build something at home and you're trying to add something, you bring in an architect. It's really it blows my mind that so many business people don't think to bring in business growth coaches like ourselves to really look at the problem situation and then map out a way forward. It just boggles my mind. And I remember when I ran my business and we were growing at astronomical rates, I didn't know what I was doing half the time. I didn't have that people around me that were helping me to see what's happening over that next hill. Luckily, I was able to figure a lot of it out, but ultimately I got to the point where I couldn't figure it out. And it would have been amazing to have me and you give me advice 6 years ago. It would have been a different story. But you know what? Here we are. And I'm excited to see what happens in the next next year, really, as we dip into this recession. And I'm excited. I'm ready. I'm growing. I'm pushing. I know you are as well, Adam. And as always, reach out to us, Manny@sparkpartners.com, Adam@sparkpartners.com. We're here to help. We've got a lot of people that are on the sidelines. Now is the time to jump in. We also have our courses, our masterminds, Think Innovation, which is a great tool for you to look at how to truly grow your business in all times, not just recession, not just when there's massive growth in the economy, but right now is the best time to take this course.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
I hate to say we're looking forward to a recession, but I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Well, look, it's not. You can't stop it, right? I mean, it's going to happen based on all these indicators. Might as well get ready to go. What I say is that if you're going to swim with sharks, know what kind of underwear to bring to the ocean.
Well said, Manny. Have a good week.
Of course. All right, Adam. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.